Hi, this is Solving the DevOps Crisis, one person at a time. And before any introductions, I would like to start with the story. This is a story about a crisis. One of our production servers was down, specifically the one in charge of all the financial transactions, meaning we were losing a lot of money. And nobody had a clue what exactly was it. So everybody was running around, screaming, waving their hands in the air. Friendships were compromised. But then came this amazing DevOps engineer, and bam, it was solved in less than 10 minutes. The amazing thing is that this person had been with us for maybe a month and already showing such a great promise. Now I want to ask you, how did you imagine that this DevOps engineer looked like? Did they look somewhat like you? Did they look like most of your teammates? The same color, gender, ethnicity, maybe even the same sexual preference? Well, if you did, then worry not. That is only human. That is implicit bias. So hi, my name is Chris Babitsky. I am a DevOps consultant, professional, and head of education in Develop. And I would like to talk with you today about bias and its correlation to the lack of quality DevOps engineers. I would like to start with the definition of implicit bias. First, we have implicit. That is something that we are doing unintentionally. We are not aware of it. Then we have bias. Bias is having a preference for or an aversion to a person or a group of people. But is it really such a bad thing to have? How come we were all born implicitly biased? Let's look back about 35,000 years ago. This is when our brain was shaped into its modern form, the modern Homo sapien brain. At that time, we were all running around in the wild, hunters-gatherers, high-fiving mammoths. It was fun and deadly. So we as a species needed a quick way to assess a situation before we even had the time to react on the conscious level. And that is why we were all equipped with this great tool, our implicit bias. But today, this same life-saving tool is making our lives, and especially our teams, less diverse. For example, let's look at the classic Dungeons & Dragons game. If we choose a team of 4 warriors, it will be a very strong team, but not so intelligent. On the other hand, if we choose a team of a paladin, rogue, druid, and a wizard, it will be a whole other story. And why them? Because each comes with their own unique set of skills. Some are better in healing. Some have more dexterity. Our adventure options just got better. In this team, they all have the same title, adventurer, but they all come from completely different origin stories and have different abilities. So we need a diverse team. And in this world of Dungeons & Dragons, we always tend to choose the perfect diverse team. But in real life, the numbers say otherwise. Let's look at the statistics. Here we can see the data collected in Stack Overflow's annual survey of 2021. This is the race and ethnicity statistics for professional developers, people in development roles. And here we can clearly see that out of almost 56,000 respondents, the dominant race is white or from European descent, with more than 60%. And even though they might be the most popular player in D&D, they don't necessarily make the best team. The same applies when looking at the gender statistics. The numbers speak for themselves. An unbelievable majority of men, with more than 92% for professional developers. Things get even worse when we look at engineering role statistics divided by gender. This one here is from Stack Overflow's annual survey of 2020. This one is less easier on the eyes, so please bear with me, I'll explain. On the x-axis, we have the number of survey respondents. On the y-axis, we have the relative participation men to women. For example, if we look at data or business analyst, you are 10 times more likely to be a man. If you're a full-stack developer, you are 15 times more likely to be a man, which is really close to the average that is marked with a dotted line. Do you see that sole red dot right there at the top? That refers to DevOps specialists. If you are a DevOps specialist, you are 30 times more likely to be a man. That is 100% above the average. Now, what does that really mean? And before we get to that, I know that some of you have really great eyesight, and yes, we also have site reliability engineers. There, you are 24 times more likely to be a man. Still not so great. So, what does those numbers really mean? It means that when we are looking for DevOps to join our team, we are probably going to prefer the candidates that look like most of our team. In this case, men, most likely white or from European descent. Furthermore, the majority that you already have will bring their friends, making this majority even bigger, and our diversity problem worse. So we have this implicit bias when it comes to hiring. Our subconscious mind will do that. It will happen unintentionally. So the solution for implicit bias is first and foremost being aware. That is the key. Once we are aware that implicit bias is a vital part of us human beings, we already made the first step in fighting against it. The fact that you are sitting here listening to a talk about bias for the past 10 minutes or so has already made an impact. And don't worry, there are practical solutions to de-bias. But just before I will tell you all about them, I want to talk about a solution that doesn't work. Affirmative action. Affirmative action is a set of policies and practices within a government or an organization seeking to include groups based on their gender, ethnicity, or sexual preferences in areas which they might be underrepresented, such as education and employment. And it doesn't work. Studies have shown affirmative action in US colleges and universities mainly did more harm than good. In a study from 1996 titled The Role of Ethnicity in Choosing and Leaving Highly Selective Institutions, led by Dartmouth professor Roger Elliott, it was found that the main reason for minority attrition was relatively low preparation in sciences for minority students in these schools. An article named The Sad Irony of Affirmative Action describes it perfectly. A student who attends a school at which their math SAT scores lands them in the top third of the class are more likely to continue and pursue a degree in science or engineering than was a student with the same score who went to a school at which that score placed them in the bottom third of the class. The problem for minority students was that due to affirmative action, being in the top third of the class was relatively rare. So the minority students simply felt like they were not good enough or that they don't belong and chose to leave. But the sad truth is, they were merely the victims of the same affirmative action that was supposed to help them. I want you to imagine being one of this minority. You don't have to go far. We all had experiences in our lives when we felt like we don't belong, when we were not a part of the collective. When you are the minority, when you are the one that is not so good at sports or at a certain game, maybe you are the only one who doesn't play D&D. You will probably think twice before speaking up. Maybe you had a good idea. Maybe it was just a joke you wanted to share, but you held yourself. Why? Maybe you were afraid to get noticed. Maybe you thought twice and the moment just passed away. Or maybe you were afraid to be pointed out as the odd one from the group. Now imagine that someone would have come up to you and said, "Hey, how are you doing?" Or, "Hey, what do you think about this?" How would that make you feel? Probably not the odd one anymore. This brings me to the first practical solution. Reach out. Any minority, or even just the shy people around you, try reaching out to them and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" It might feel a bit forced to do so, but the moment you do, the other side will feel appreciated and valued. And the best thing about it, you might get a whole new point of view and receive an answer to your problem in a more creative and exciting way. In time, this single conversation can evolve to a day-to-day communication, making this person a part of your life and a part of your group. And maybe someday you will decide to do it again and again until finally you will control the bias. So by now, we have two solutions that can be implemented immediately: being aware and reaching out. These solutions apply to all of us and are great for our current teams. But what about some long-term solutions? What about the root of the problem? I believe that the root of the problem is in the hiring process. So recruiters, team leaders, any of you in charge of the hiring process in your company, I am reaching out to you. And I want to share with you our story and how we at Develop managed to hire, on average, one new DevOps consultant every 3 weeks. About 2 years ago, we faced a crisis in our DevOps consulting company. The market demand was much higher than we could supply. The traditional recruitment process, depending on CV and artificial credentials, was not working. We are a DevOps consulting company. We make DevOps consultants, and not every great DevOps engineer can be a great DevOps consultant. So we are looking for very specific traits. After realizing that, we have decided to sit down and sum it up to 3 essential must-haves: problem solvers, self-learners, and team players. But how can we check if someone actually has those traits in a 30-minute interview? That is how we came up with our bootcamp. We start with about 500 applicants who do our online exam. Then, after interviews, we have about 20 applicants who go through an intensive 13 weeks long journey in which they have 2 exams and a big project along the way. And at the end, we have on average between 5 to 8 great, refined DevOps consultants, which we know they are problem solvers, self-learners, and team players. And because of that, we now have 12% women DevOps in our company. We still wish to do better, but for now, having 300% above average globally is already something to be proud about. Now, I understand that this solution cannot be easily applied in most companies, but there are things that we can take away from this that can be applied in all companies. And I want to share them with you so we can all thrive in a diverse community. So the first thing we did was figuring out the bare necessities that we need in our DevOps consultants. And why is that important? Because, because when you look for a long list of traits, then you are making your recruitment process complex. It is much like looking for a life partner. At first, you have this long list, likes the same books, the same TV shows, the same sports, etc., etc. And at the end, you are left with something like, hey, they live next door, that's cool. And you need to sum it up to 3 essential must-haves. Then you can clearly see and filter the traits that you are looking for. It makes this process easier on both sides. And no, I am not talking only about juniors. It applies to seniors also. When you are looking for seniors, do you really need someone with 6 years of experience with Kubernetes? Or will 2 years suffice as long as they passed your exam and you know they are problem solvers? Then that is what you write in your job description. The 2 years, the bare minimum. That might solve a problem you didn't even know existed. In the Hewlett-Packard internal report, it was found that women will not apply for jobs unless they answer 100% of qualifications, while men will apply if they only have 60% of the qualifications. We do not want to miss this opportunity. It is us who should reach out. And we can do so by writing the bare necessities in our job postings. So now that we have great job postings, we can get to the interview part. But wait, before any interviews in which our bias might creep in, why not ditch the CV? Before any actual face-to-face interaction with our candidates, we can give them an online exam, which they should do in a sufficient amount of time, no more than 3 hours. If they succeed, then we already have an indicator about their technical skills before the interview, thus eliminating the chances of prejudice from our side. If they failed, then we just saved valuable time for both sides. If you take the time to write a precise online exam that is tailor-suited for your needs, you are saving a lot of interview and training time in the future. Continuing with our hiring process, now we can get to the actual interview with no CV, of course. If you're looking for seniors, then it is okay to demand prior experience, but I would still recommend for the interviewers to avoid from looking in the candidate's CV. We all know, and we probably do it ourselves, CVs are artificial, and it is better to get to know someone without this prior knowledge, simply because we will not be biased, for better or worse. And therefore, we will hire the person who is actually fit to do the job after we genuinely got to know them. In the interview itself, it is really important to understand the candidate's way of thought and see if they truly understand the technology they're working on. And because we specifically are looking for self-learners, we will give a candidate a task involving an unknown programming language or a challenge they have never faced before. And that way, we can evaluate if someone is a self-learner or not. So now we checked 2 of our 3 traits: problem solver by using the online exam, and self-learner by checking our candidates when challenged with an unfamiliar programming language. So what about team player? And why do we even need team players? Because even if we have only one DevOps engineer in our company, they still need to be able to communicate with everyone and be the bridge between operations and developers. That is why we're called DevOps. And if you are looking for team players, then I wish to suggest this. Let your final candidates work on a project together. This gives you the opportunity to see how they work together in a team. How do they communicate with each other? Do they share ideas with the group? Are they clear when they are trying to explain complex things? And the real thing that you should ask yourself at the end of this group project is, with who would you like to work with? This teamwork is highly appreciated and evaluated in our bootcamp, and that is how we check if someone is a team player. And now we have checked all 3 of our traits using these 3 methods. First, figuring out the bare necessities that we are looking for in our teammates. The second, ditching the CV, both in our pre-interview exam and during the interview itself. And then, having our final candidates work on a project together and checking how they work together in a team. So it doesn't matter where the person you chose to hire got educated, how many years of experience they have, and from where. You know their technical abilities, and you know they will be able to handle the day-to-day task that you will be giving them. And it is based on who they are as a person after you genuinely got to know them. And there is no place for prejudice after this process. And these are the 3 takeaways that can be implemented by anyone in charge of the hiring process. And there are the 2 things that we can all take away from this: being aware and reach out. But the most important thing that I wish for us all to take away from this is awareness, awareness, and some more awareness. Once you are aware, you can never be unaware again. Thank you.